This is a summary of the Aeneid written by Virgil. This summary is a general summary of the key events that took place within the Aeneid. So, the Aeneid begins with um, the Trojan War. In the Trojan War, we see this war between the Greeks and the Trojans, and it's very brutal, it's very horrific. Within this war, you see Odysseus, you see Achilles, you see Hector, you see a bunch of Greek legends such as Ajax and Dionysus. And basically, there's just this great war between the Greeks and the Trojans. And this is one of the wars that is renowned because of everything that happens within it. The gods are heavily involved within this war. Some of the gods supported the Greeks. Some of the gods supported the Trojans. So the reason why one can say that this war is very impactful, or the reason why it's very interesting, it's because we see how the gods were basically being involved within this war just for their pleasure, just because of their own selfish desires. So it kind of felt that the Trojans, the Greeks within this war, they're basically pawns within the game, right? They're basically objects within the games that the Greek gods are playing. So the war takes place. Um, we get an account of the war taking place, and soon after the war takes place, Aeneas, the pretty much the story is named after Aeneas, Aeneid, Aeneas. So we kind of see why this the story is derived from that name. So we follow Aeneas, and Aeneas, while the city of Troy was being sacked by the Greeks, he decides to leave with a few people, with at least a good number of people, enough people to help him, take over Italy at the end of this story. So Aeneas leaves his house, his wife, his children, and his dad was on his back. His dad was on his back, and he took his family. They left his house. Before they left his house, however, he did get like a sign from the gods where his son started glowing, and this was basically just a sign from the gods saying, "Oh, you need to leave your house, because you're destined for something." Again, one of the most important things within this novel is that there is a prophecy, right? There is a prophecy within the Aeneid that Aeneas is supposed to establish Rome. Now, Aeneas later becomes the founder of Rome. He later becomes the forefather of Rome, right? And he is the one that establishes Rome. It is said that children are never dead. They never really were erased from the face of the earth, because what happens is they live through Aeneas and then they live through Rome. So as great as the city of Troy was, Rome was greater. So basically, the majesty, the greatness of Troy just got transferred to Rome. So Aeneas leaves his home with his followers. They sail off, and the Greeks basically tear down the children. They tear down Troy, and they basically burn the city down. Um, and after they do that, you get from other stories such as the Odyssey with Odysseus. You kind of get an account of what happens after they plunder Troy's heights. So the Aeneid goes on, and we basically follow Aeneas throughout his journeys. Now, not exactly a problem, but the complaint that some people have about the Aeneid is that it copies the Odyssey and the Iliad. The same way that Odysseus goes on a bunch of islands, he goes on a bunch of journeys, a bunch of adventures. His men get eaten, his men get killed, his men get slaughtered. The same way that happens to Odysseus, we kind of see that same idea, that same development of situations within the Aeneid. And a lot of things that took place within the Iliad is also seen in the Aeneid. when we saw how Achilles' best friend or partial significant other got killed. When we saw that, that kind of happens here with Aeneas and Pallas, because when Turnus kills Pallas within the Aeneid, the same reaction that Achilles had when they killed his best friend, Aeneas has the same reaction. So after Aeneas leaves Troy. He sails off. He has a bunch of people with him, and on his journey, he doesn't. He kind of sort of loses people because at a certain point, the people he was traveling with, they decided that sailing was enough. They had enough sailing because basically they were refugees. Their homes, their city, their country was plundered. Their way of life was destroyed. So they had to make a new way of living for themselves. And what happens is you get them going to different places and they're trying to find a way to establish themselves. And as Aeneas is traveling, he's trying to figure out what he needs to do to basically have another kingdom. The gods tell him, one of the gods tell him that you're going to be the new founder of Rome. You're going to be the founder of this kingdom, of this empire that is going to span the whole world. And it's kind of true because Rome did become, this humongous superpower. Rome was basically America before America. That's what Rome was. And so Aeneas is the founder of that. So Aeneas does lose a few people in his journey. There's this one instance where the women within his followers they tried to burn down the ships that they were using after they landed on a safe island, and they tried to burn the ships down because they found a place that was kind of suitable, and they were like, maybe we can settle down here. But the men, they didn't want to do that. They didn't want to stop traveling. They didn't want to stop finding this thing that they're supposed to destine, right? And really, the men, after a while, they do get back on the ships. They manage to put the fires out with the help of the gods, and they leave some people behind because some people are just tired and sick of traveling so much to find a home where and one of the things is that they found places that they could stay, but Aeneas just didn't want to stay because he has a prophecy to fulfill, right? So the ships set off, and the next significant stop that they reach at is basically they reach Carthage. And Carthage is very interesting because we get one of the most interesting developments within the Aeneid is where Aeneas falls in love with Dido, and Dido is she's the queen of Carthage, and basically she's built this country, this empire, this we can even say a sort of city state for herself, and she's doing her best to keep it afloat, to keep it alive, and Aeneas comes into town, and we know that Aeneas, his mother, is a god, and so this does play a lot of tricks. To be clear, Aeneas' mother is Aphrodite, and what happens is Aphrodite uses Cupid to make Dido fall in love with Aeneas, and so Aeneas stays in Carthage, and Dido says, why don't you stay here instead of going off to Italy? If you stay here with me, I'll make you happy. Your people can live with me. Your people can live with my people. Your people are my people, and my people are my people. So basically, Dido invites Aeneas to stay in Carthage and rule with her. But Aeneas says no. He says, "Oh, I'm supposed to found Rome. I'm supposed to be the new founder of Rome. So I really can't stay in Carthage and be your husband." And so Aeneas decides after a while. He stays there for a while. He stays in Carthage for a while. But then he decides, okay, I can't stay here anymore. I have to go found Rome, right? And when Dido finds out that Aeneas basically betrays her because she thought that they were going to have a marriage. She thought that Aeneas was her new husband. This is a woman who swore that she would have never got married after her previous king died. So when Aeneas basically, you know, forgot about her, when Aeneas basically ditched her, she finds his sword that he had left behind, and she stabs herself, and she throws herself into his a fire where all of his stuff was burning. So she burned all of Aeneas's stuff, and she stabbed herself with a sword, and she dies. So it's very sad because Dido was a very good queen of Carthage, and she was prosperous. Her country was prosperous. And just because Aphrodite, just because the gods wanted to mess with that, she lost everything. And Aeneas just basically leaves Carthage, and he goes to find Rome. Right, he goes to become the founder of Rome. And Carthage later, the Romans do destroy Carthage. In her deathbed or on her deathbed or before she died, Dido was like, forever Rome will be at war with Carthage. And she cursed Aeneas's name. She cursed his existence. She said that he should never find happiness and that he should suffer. But in the end, he does find happiness. He becomes, um, you know, Italy's founder, Italy's ruler, and then Rome's ruler, Rome's founder. He's not Italy's founder. I'm saying that he is the founder of Rome. He is the founder of an empire that lasted for several centuries. And so the story goes on. Dido dies, and Aeneas he goes on. Now, at the end of the novel, when we get close to the end of the novel, there are other parts of this novel, but the most important things are basically when Aeneas spends time in Carthage. He tells the whole story of what happened to him and his crew and his people, and how the Greeks basically took away his life from him. And then the other parts that are very important to the story is the beginning, how you see the development of what happened after the Iliad, of what happened to the Trojans. So they go forward, and eventually, with the help of the gods, of course, we see Aeneas. He finds Italy, and basically later there's a war that begins. And when this war begins, it's between the Trojans and I guess we can call them the Italians, or basically Italians or tribes that lived in Italy, or people that lived in Italy, and they wanted to remain independent. But this war goes down, and Turnus is one of these individuals who's really brave, who's really trying to fight for his freedom, trying to fight to keep his realm, and basically they go to war, and the gods help Aeneas a lot. Now, again, the same way I don't like Odysseus, because in the Odyssey, Odysseus is helped a lot by the gods. The god helped him a lot. The same way I don't like Odysseus is the same way I don't like Aeneas, because both of them they wouldn't have made it. They wouldn't be anything without the Greek, the Olympian gods, right? Because Aeneas in the Iliad, he almost died. The gods had to save him. And uh, also in his own story, right? In his own story, he almost died because while he's at war with the Italian troops or the Italian people, there's an arrow that comes to him, and somebody fires an arrow, and he almost died. But the gods had to step in and save him. So a lot of saving of Aeneas in this novel, a lot of helping of Aeneas by the gods, because he can't do it by himself. So we get this epic battle, back and forth, back and forth. People are dying, hundreds of people are dying, and many men are falling. And eventually, what happens is Turnus, who is basically the strongest warrior within the Italian side. He kills Pallas, who is Aeneas's best friend. And after he kills Pallas, Aeneas is, he gets really mad. He gets really frustrated. And other things happen before the ending comes. But we see the war continues until where we see Aeneas chase down Turnus. They have a chase scene where Aeneas is chasing Turnus. At the beginning of this war, Turnus was very powerful. He was on his chariot. His side was winning. His side was triumphant. Aeneas almost died. So it looked like the Italians was going to win. But what happens is um, Aeneas chases down Turnus. First, he throws his spear at him, he wounds him, and it kind of felt like at the end, Turnus would have had a chance to stay alive. But because Turnus was the one that killed um, Pallas. He's the one that killed Aeneas's best friend. Aeneas, he gets really mad. He gets really revengeful, and he takes out his sword and he kills Turnus. So this whole novel is a very interesting, and basically, I just talked about for this video's purposes. I just wanted to talk about the most interesting parts of it, the most interesting scenes within it, and really the most interesting scenes to me personally is what happened when Aeneas talks to Dido's people about what happened in Troy, because they already knew about the war, because the Trojan War with the Greeks and Trojans, it was kind of something that was kind of worldwide. It was widely known. So it was very interesting that they already kind of sort of knew about what happened within that war. And when Aeneas talks about it, it's very interesting when we see it from his point of view. Because when you read the Odyssey and the Iliad, you don't really get the Trojans' point of view of what happened. You only get the Greek version. So I really recommend if anybody is trying to read this novel or any of these novels, the Odyssey, the Iliad, um, and you know these three novels. What I have to say about them is that they give you a full 360-degree view of the Greek side, of the children's side, and so forth. So it's really impactful. It gives you everything you need to know about what happens with this war and how it affected the people within this war. So again, the Aeneid, the Iliad, and the I'm not saying this right. I mean the Iliad, the Aeneid, and the Odyssey. These are tongue twisters, so it's kind of hard to say. But really, those three books they give you a view of what happens within the Trojan War, the aftermath of it, the beginning of it, why it happened, how it happened. So, most stories you read, you kind of only get the front version or the protagonist part, but these three novels they give you all sides, so it's very interesting. With the Aeneid, the last part that I want to talk about is how senseless this war between the Italians and the Trojans war, because in the end they become one people, they become one force, which is Rome. So really, the whole struggle, the whole war between the Italians and the Trojans for dominance was kind of pointless because in the end they become one huge empire that was known as the superpower of the past. So yeah, that's basically the Aeneid. This just my version of it, just my summary, a basic summary of it, of the key points, of the key ideas, and what happened. I hope you guys like that summary. Please like, subscribe, leave me a comment, tell me what you think about this video, and I'll see you in the next video.